Monde Zondeki. This is my story. These are my words.
All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are. And thank you very much for joining us for yet another episode of the African Playbook Network's My Story, My Words. Today, we are very fortunate to be joined by South African cricketing royalty, a man who paved, I know he's going to be very modest, but you know, when you look at his story, he's one of the people that have paved the way for the players that we see in today's modern cricket that we get to watch and are so privileged to get to watch every day. And the reason why we have you here, Budi, today is and, you know, coming out of the Cricket World Cup, I think it's very fitting that we get you in and we get to hear your story so that we can share, you know, you can share your story and maybe there'll be kids out there who'll be able to pick up, you know, some of the lessons that you've learned in your career, some of the experiences that you've gone through, and they can put something together for themselves and continue driving towards them becoming professional cricket players. And with those words, I do want to firstly start off by saying thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to having you share the story. And to kick things off, we are joined by Monde Zondeki, a very special, I think, king of debuts is what I'll call you, because your Test debut and your ODI debut were quite special, both of them, for the national team. But before we get to that, I actually want us to take it all the way back to where it all started. And I want to pose a question to you of, when you look back now at your early childhood, what are the earliest memories that you have growing up about sport?
Well, one, that's a lot. The introduction, that is. Thank you for having me. It's obviously an honor to be here and to share my story and whatnot and talk about cricket. And then to your question, my early childhood memories, well, sports in general, not cricket. I mean, I honestly, I was introduced to cricket quite late into my childhood, probably like 9 when I went to it. But growing up as Lalin, just outside King, it's pretty much soccer. That's what I remember. I mean, I remember Dr. Kumalo on TV watching with family. But not much other sports, to be honest. Maybe a little bit of rugby, but certainly no cricket. Not in the 80s that I can remember, but definitely soccer at home as Lalin. That's about it, sporting memories. As a childhood, but before I obviously got to it, and then got introduced to rugby or cricket, all sports.
But you say you started off with the soccer. And understandably, because that's a very big sport, the Eastern Cape. And some might even argue that rugby is also thereabout. What then, with soccer, like, did you play club soccer? What was your play?
If we're talking about the 80s, there was no such thing as club anything, as far as I know anyway. As a 3-4-year-old, whatever, it was all just playing for fun when you're outside, because we were outside a lot those days. So yeah, there was no club, there was no sport at school. Education, went back home and you did your chores as a kid, but then you played outside and you watched on weekends. So no, there was no club anything. We just played as kids, and we obviously our heroes on TV, or Dr. Kumar, as I said, Max Mapanyan, in the 80s, that is. There was no structure to any sport. So sport wasn't a big thing back then for us. We were just kids, really just playing around and having fun.
So growing up then, what influences were there around you, and what role models did you have growing up?
Well, if we're going to speed it up to when I got to it, that's where it really started in terms of my understanding or watching all sports instead of just watching soccer as we had back then. So when I got to Dale, 91 that is, we were encouraged to play sports winter and summer, that is. So you had to play something and choose. And for whatever reason, you go where your friends go, right? So in summer, we all went to cricket. Wasn't quite sure about swimming at the time. We couldn't swim at the time anyway. So I had to learn how to swim. So it was cricket for the summer sport, but you could play all sports. And the nice thing about junior school is that they made time for you to play 10 different sports in a season. So cricket, athletics, pretty much everything in the summertime. And that's how we got introduced to cricket. Wasn't that good initially in the beginning, obviously, because it was a very foreign sport to me. But a year later, I started playing under 10A, and I was starting to really enjoy it. And I was already, I think, the quickest guy in the school, in my age group, sorry, at under 10. So that's how I got introduced into cricket, into sports. And then in terms of influences, it was obviously the guys around me that were older and they were really good at school, in our junior school. But I think the guy that really caught our eye in junior school was when we read about Umakai. And he so happened at that time to go to Edale, but he was in the senior school. And he was in the hostel literally across the road from us because we were in the junior school, and the junior school is 100 meters away, 200 meters away from Presby, where Makai was. So we used to see him as kids when he used to go to practice and stuff. So it was, so if you want to talk about influencers and guys that you look up to, it's certainly him to start off with.
And before we dive deep into the story of Dale, and guys, we're going to stick on this one because we're both old Dalians.
Okay.
But before we jump straight into that one, I want us to go back because when we speak about your childhood, there's a story there that I would love to actually speak more about, and is ukukhula kwakho, because you spent a year in exile. And I'm not sure if a lot of people will be aware of that, but you want us to go there?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So, growing up in the 80s, South Africa as a country is within the apartheid era and slowly coming towards an end. And you, your uncle, and your family have to move out of the country. How was that experience for you as a child?
Well, I didn't have to move out. Well, I mean, my uncle didn't have to move out. He was already there. I didn't know who he was until I actually went to go live with him in 89, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I mean, at the time there wasn't, because you blocked out from a lot of the things that are happening in the world, and TV, there was no DSTV at the time, so it had like 2 or 3 channels. So we as a kid certainly wasn't aware of what was going outside of the little bubble that you lived in, Islalin. We didn't go into town, I can't remember ever experiencing it down at all at that time. So the reason that I not had to leave, but the reason that I did go join them is there was a bit of violence that happened for whatever reason that week in Islalini. And there was a lot of ANC, Cisco stuff, oil calls and all that stuff. So my mom, who wasn't living with us at the time, but was a student studying, got worried about the violence. And that's how I found out I had other cousins, and my family, that is, that obviously Steve Treta was the son, the uncle that you talk of. So he was already in Zambia at the time. So the plan was for us to go there and get away from the violence and all that stuff that was happening in Islalin. Our house got attacked as well. So that really was the breaking point for my mom to say, I'm buying. So I went to exile, as you said, Zambia, to go join my uncle and them. Never knew who they were. So it was pretty much a very new world, new country. People that I didn't even know growing up existed. And yeah, it was great for me in terms of when I got back into the country in 1990, when Mandela was obviously released, and a lot of the veterans, ANC veterans, were allowed back into the country. That's when the introduction into sports came into it, because I started living with my uncle full time, even when we got back into the country. So until this day, I mean, I call his wife Umama and Tata growing up. So yeah, so that's how I got into it there, funny enough. I think if the move for me to leave Islalin hadn't happened, I don't know if I'm here today, to be quite honest.
And you mentioned something which is a very important thing, and Inimba Yabazal, where you lived in a bubble. You weren't aware of what was happening. And how important do you feel you being blocked off everything that was happening was for you growing up?
I don't know. I think as a child, you don't really understand the circumstances you live in. So it doesn't really affect you that much as a kid, because you don't know any better. So I don't think it affected me in any kind of way. I mean, racism, all that stuff. We didn't, as again, bubble, didn't see other people besides the people that are around you in your little bubble area. I can't remember ever seeing a white person until the army came in 89, as I said, when the violence started. So you were oblivious and be ignorant to a lot of things as a kid. And I think sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's not. So yeah, no, I wasn't aware of anything and it didn't affect me at all, I don't think.
So Puti, we then move into Dale. In the 90s, you moved to Dale College, the junior school that is. And you are part of a generation which is unique because this is now the very first time where black kids and white kids are allowed to come to the same school and be together. How was that transition? Let's leave the sports side of it. But you now, as you said, the only time you had come across a white person was when the army came into Elaling to intervene with the conflict that was happening. Now, you then have to step out of Elaling, step out of that bubble, and actually move to a school where you're going to sit next to a white child in class.
Yeah, but again, I think as a kid, all that stuff really doesn't affect you at that age anyway. I can't remember thinking, ooh, I'm around white people and it's a huge shock and a surprise. I just remember being a kid and getting introduced to new people, I guess, in many ways. Yeah, there were a couple of black guys at that time. I think there was 9 of us. I can't remember how many kids were at school at Dale at the time, but it was over 300-400 people, kids, I think. And there was 9 of us at that time that arrived in 91. But again, as a kid, I don't think it was in the forefront of my head that I'm around white people and there's racism in this country, whatnot. Yeah, I think as a kid, you do, and you enjoy your company and the people that you're around. You're not so aware of your surroundings as much. So as soon as you got into sports as well, then it was easier to make friends.
Yeah.
Because you're part of a team and you travel to other schools and it becomes an experience that doesn't involve you thinking anything about race, to be quite honest. It's just about enjoying the sport and the people that you're around. As a kid, you just want to play and have fun. So I didn't really think too much about that, to be quite honest. It wasn't something that was brought up either as a kid about race and how to treat each other. You just as kids, you play.
And then at Dale, you get there. You made your debut as a fast bowler. A lot of people will know you as a fast bowler. But an interesting fact is you were not initially a bowler, a fast bowler as per se. You were a leg spinner.
Yeah, I don't even know why I started leg spinning. Like, it's probably the most difficult art to do out of all of them. But I did. I played around a little bit with leg spin. And then one day just playing around in the nets. The nice thing is at Dale Junior that the nets were literally part of the school, but also D.V. Taylor House, the hostel, was right there. So on a Sunday, for example, we used to go play in the concrete area there where the nets were, and just wasn't an official practice. So as a kid, you just get a tennis ball and you bowl. And I started bowling fast and started coming out really fast. So I just stuck to it. And that's how it really started. It wasn't something that I thought of. I didn't see Shane Warne at the time bowling leg spin, decided I want to be like Shane Warne. He wasn't around then either. So it was just something I was trying. And eventually I found my calling, I guess, if you want to call it, which is fast bowling, which is how I got into that, yeah.
And you then swap it over from being a leg spinner to a fast bowler. And coincidentally, as you said, Uput Makaya was right across the road, a Presbyterian house.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that, well, yeah, that's what
Presby,
they call it.
yeah, Presby.
And then he's also a fast bowler and a very well-renowned fast bowler. Growing up, Ucho, you guys used to see him go to practice, and he was one of the role models that you looked up to. Growing up, what are some of the lessons in to you being at the junior school, him being at the senior school? What are some of the things that you picked up from him there? Because at a later stage, you also then became very close friends when you both went there.
No, at that age, I picked up nothing. He literally was, this is 95 though, when we started being aware of him. So I got there 91. I was really bowling really fast by the time that I was aware of who he is. Because obviously it was in the papers. It was quite a big thing for, I forget what age he was at the time, but he was playing for the men's side already in 95. So it was quite a big thing that a guy at school was really playing with the really older men. So that was 95 when we became aware of him. So I never had a conversation with him until I started probably seeing him at border, practicing with the border guys. So there was no relationship so much at school, even when I got to the senior school in 96, and he was there, but he wasn't there that long because he left quite early. So there wasn't much of interaction or relationship, to be quite honest with you, until until later on in our lives. So at that time, it was really just seeing him from afar. When we used to come back, because the Dale Junior fields used to go past the first team cricket fields and the rugby fields. So when you walk past, we went back to hostel. We used to sit and watch the practices a bit. So that was fun for us. And then go back to hostel, obviously, because we had to go back to school at a certain time. So no, there was no interaction, no talking. It was just really admiring from afar.
It's quite remarkable speaking to you and you describing the town and how you would walk past this Presbyterian house, the first team fields to Dale Junior, and even the nets at Dale Junior. Not much has changed. Everything's still the same. But let's move on. And I want to talk about your rugby career, because if you walk the passages as a Dale, you're going to find a picture of you in a blazer and a white scarf and a first team photo. Yeah, How was that rugby career for you?
It wasn't a career, but it's just well, I mean, again, we were pretty much, as I said to you, you would know, in junior school they encourage kids to play sports as much as you can. So I played everything. We all tried everything, and I so happened to be good at sports in general. So rugby was certainly something that I loved doing. It lasted 80 minutes instead of a whole day of cricket. Sure. When you get older, actually, I started preferring rugby over cricket because none of my really good close friends play cricket, really. The guys that I was in hostel with all played rugby. They all played pretty decent rugby. Some played first, some didn't. So because you want to be around your friends a lot at that time, I preferred to play rugby, and it was shorter. And Saturdays in summer and the heat, sometimes I was a bit lazy. Cricket, I'm plunged, and there's nobody watching. Yeah. So at school, rugby was the thing to play, right? If you play first team, then everybody sort of was there to watch, and it was fun. So I loved rugby, and I was pretty much good at rugby too from quite early on. I started off as a wing who couldn't catch the ball because I didn't know what rugby was. Hand-eye coordination hadn't caught up yet. But by the time that caught up, 9, 10, I became really good at it. And I played first team for 2 years, 99 and 2000. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't going to do it as a professional, but yeah, I almost got recruited by a guy at Border who wanted me to go to the academy, but cricket was already number one on the list, so that was never going to change.
Before I ask you why you chose cricket over rugby, I want to first ask you, at your time at Dale, having played rugby and cricket, what are some of the fondest memories in terms of on the sports field that you have?
Ooh, yeah. Cricket, I find this memory of cricket. I think the thing that I really enjoyed the most, I would imagine, I think in my age group, because there's always a competition thing amongst the guys that are either a year younger, a year older. Yeah. Well, our team's better than yours and whatnot. So my age group, cricket-wise, I thought we were unbeaten under 13. Under 14, we were unbeaten. And then a lot of us, because Dale at the time, cricket-wise, wasn't the strongest, a lot of the top guys in my age group who were 14, 15, got recruited to play first team at a very young age. So the team was pretty much broken up at 14 because we were unbeaten under 14. Then by the time we got to under 15, we were all playing first team cricket, which is kind of a bit of unfair in many ways because we didn't play with the guys our age group. Yeah. We were playing with guys who were 18, 19, we were 15. But that, one, it showed that we had the talent, but two, the talent at Dale at the time, cricket-wise, wasn't high end. And then matric, again, when we eventually got together as an age group, we were unbeaten again. So that age group, I think I really enjoyed the fact that I played with those guys and that we were that good and dominant cricket-wise. And then rugby, probably 99, when I didn't play first team from the beginning. I played seconds and then reserves for the first team the first part of the year. The second part, I played first team. Really strong team that I think number 3 in the country, 99. Had a couple of guys, Kawunda, Blackham Timka, who obviously do some closer commentating, and then sadly Kawunda passed away. But played with those guys as well. So yeah, that's it. 99 was a really good year for us, and for me, obviously, memory-wise. And in 2000, wasn't as good result-wise, but had some. I think we beat Selborne by 40 points at the time. It was a record at home. So yeah, there are those little memories in 2000, but I think 99 was a big year.
So you actually been part of really good been a part of really good teams, especially with the cricket, having gone unbeaten under 13, and even when you guys got to first team level in matrics in '99. Do you still remember some of the guys that were in the cricket side with you?
Yeah. I'm still friends with some of them. There's a guy called Yao that played. I mean, professionally, there's only one guy who probably played. Abongile Sotum, who also does a bit of. He's an umpire for South Africa. Well, does umpiring locally for South African games. He also commentates his class in cricket. So Abongile Sotum is one that played professionally. I played with him at Border for the men's side. And then I know Francha from Mark played, Donovan Lenz, Shane Fredericks. There's quite a few guys. So I'm still friends with Ngange, Yao. I mean, I speak to them all the time on WhatsApp groups. So yeah, I still remember a lot of the guys. Murray Ranger, Grant Howell, Leander Mbande, who's now a teacher at Dale Jr. Yeah, so I remember a lot of the guys I played cricket with, especially in my 2000 matric year, yeah. And rugby, of course, but yeah, I remember.
And as you mentioned those names, a lot of you are in New Boys Test. I'm not sure if they still do it. But at Dale, there was 2009 when I got there. There was something called the New Boys Test, where the grade 8s, you get the first 4 or 5 weeks of the school year, where you get to learn about the history of the school. And then in the 6th week, you write a test just to test your knowledge. And so it was like the names of the fields, the pictures, like, okay, there's a picture of an unbeaten side, so kubuzwe, what year was it? And a lot of you are in that. Mr. Shane Fredericks was there, was first team hockey coach when I got there, 2009. As you say, Mr. Mbande was at the junior school. And
Mbata was actually there, Tembela Mbata played.
With him as well. Having coached, I think they're more than 10 years now as the under 13A coach at the junior school.
Yeah, he's been there for a long time. Yeah. Mbata's been there for a long time, Tembela Mbata, that is. He also played first team, yeah. He's at junior school now.
It's very interesting, about how that year went on to shape quite a lot in terms of the school. And at a critical time of it, maybe not now, but during my time, where we struggled to keep talent within the school. There's the whole issue of poaching.
Right, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But the people in your year played a critical role in attracting the talent. Let's move away from the school, and you say you played with Otam Swords professionally, and you then make that transition from high school to professional sports, and you get an opportunity rugby-wise and cricket-wise, and why do you choose to go with the cricket?
That was an easy decision. One, I was certainly more talented. I always felt cricket more than rugby, as much as I enjoyed rugby, probably a little bit more. And I was recruited cricket-wise, which is kind of silly to say, but from the age of, there's a guy called Greg Hayes who saw me bowl at 11, and he said to me that, at 11, it sounds like a ridiculous statement, but he said like, he thinks I can play for South Africa, and I thought he was a crazy old man. So, and then they paid for in high school, they paid for our education. Basically, it was a bursary from Border Cricket, and I signed a contract. They still owe me money, actually, I think. I signed a contract in 1999. I wasn't even matric yet, to make sure that I stayed in the border region, because they'd been hearing rumors that other teams were trying to recruit me to after school to go play in Gauteng, for example. So they wanted to keep me in the border region. So, cricket pretty much chose me. I didn't really choose it. It pretty much chose me. And the people that were involved in cricket were heavily involved in recruiting me and making sure that cricket was what I take after school. So that was an easy decision for me. It wasn't hard at all.
So rugby was then something to keep you busy.
I just enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved playing it. You know how big rugby is. It's called an Itdale, first team. So, and also, again, most of my friends played first team or around about first, second. So yeah, rugby was, the winter sport that I really loved and I enjoyed.
So you say you got identified as an 11-year-old, and then you sign your contract to keep you within the border region in matric.
Wow. No, I think 99, I was still, 17 at the time, 16, 17.
And then how do you then continue to balance? Because this is something that is a big issue for a lot of kids. Balancing the fact that you still got 2 more years of school before you actually become a professional cricket player. How do you how did you keep yourself grounded, if I'm going to put it like that, to finish off the school and then move on?
Oh, no, that's easy. But was it going to quit school with my parents? No, I was never going to quit school. And that was easy. I mean, the first thing you wanted to do was pass that. And I know boys can be mean and nasty, especially in colleges. So if you failed, then you became the butt of the jokes and whatnot. So, I mean, I didn't care about getting A's, to be honest with you, because I knew that I was going to play cricket. In hindsight, I probably should have concentrated more on my education. But I really, once I knew that cricket was going to be that, I was like, as long as I pass, right, your parents will be okay, because I wasn't going to go to varsity. It wasn't part of the plan. So I didn't really concentrate too much. And there's some regrets about that. I didn't put more into my education, at school, that is. Yeah. But in terms of the balancing, it was easy. I mean, I had school, and I had to pass, and I had to go to classes. And then I had sports in the afternoon and on weekends. So there was no pressure, and there was no thought of me neglecting school or anything like that at all. So yeah, it was easy.
And is there then anything that changes in your practice schedules?
No.
Or how you prepared for school?
No, everything was the same. Games. No, nothing changes. Everything was the same. It was just school. It was just sports, really. Yeah. You went to practice when you had to go to practice. And
no extra hours of practice.
No, there wasn't extra hours. And the nice thing is the school looked after all that stuff for you. They gave you the hours and knew exactly where you're going to be. I mean, you knew your schedule, where you're going to be every day from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed. So it was a nice thing about going to a school like that. The structures are very good and everything's put in place for you. All you got to do is show up, really, and do your job. But in terms of that, structure was there and it was good.
Okay. And then when we move on, you get into the border side. School's done. You get into the border side. You're now a professional cricketer.
Yeah.
When you walk into the team, who are some of the people that are
there? Border men's side. Our captain was Peter Stratham. There's a guy called Aspirations, who was a West Indian, who was our pro at the time. Mark Boucher didn't play much because they started playing for Boucher already started playing for South Africa in '97, so they were Makaya, but they were in and out of the team, but they didn't play much, so I wouldn't count them as the guys when I walked in that were around. So Stratham, Drakes, Tyron Henderson. Trying to think of some recognizable names. Border at the time, Pete Botha, who is now the bowling coach for South Africa in Test matches. He was part of the team. But Border at the time, even today, isn't one of the bigger provinces in terms of big names coming in that played for South Africa. There was only a few guys here and there. But they were still a very good team that competed and played and were always competing for trophies. Never really won one at the time, but they were always in finals, always competing. A guy called Richard Pybus, who's now the director of cricket at UWC, he was our coach at the time, and he's coached all around the world. So the structures, again, at Border were very good. Not too many big names, but we were still a very good team that did very well.
So then you coming into a team that's fairly good, that's doing well, that's competing for trophies, and as a youngster coming into the side, what challenges, if there were any, did you come across?
Well, I mean, it's a new environment, but it was also, they made it as comfortable as possible for me. But the nice thing about Border is that a program, I forget what it was called at the time, but it was sponsored by Border anyway. We, as a kid who was still at school, there was a lot of the guys my age group were really talented. We got to meet the Border men's side. Like if they're on the Border under 18 side was around, we used to interact with the Border guys. And they had a mentorship program where they assigned you to someone. Like I was assigned to Vesper Jace because he was a fast bowler while I was still at school. And so I had a relationship with him in terms of, he used to call me, I used to call him and just chat. Before I even played for Report at the time, I was still at school. And every kid that they thought was talented who might make it was given a mentor to have a conversation with or to help him or have a relationship with. So I knew the guys pretty well, not very well, but as well as you could know someone at the time. By the time I walked into the Border men's side, so I was familiar with them. It wasn't like a new environment or new people that I'd never seen before. So we had conversations, relationships. We had to have brides with these guys while we were still at school. So by the time I got there, and I played for the men's side straight out of school. So I was 18 when I played my first game, but I knew who they were. So it was pretty a comfortable environment to be in. I wasn't a guy who spoke a lot in general. I was pretty shy, especially back then. So, but I was very comfortable, and they made it very comfortable for me, which I enjoyed. And that the performances and all that stuff take care of themselves. But in terms of just being around those guys, it was quite comfortable.
And I think what you mentioned, the whole mentorship program, I think that's something that's listening to you speak of. It's a beautiful idea, especially when you can identify the people that you want to be a part of it, a part of the system that you currently have, and assigning current players to them. And do you think that really made a difference in terms of how you got into the change room, and how you interacted with them?
For sure, in terms of being comfortable around new teammates, I think that could help your performances as well, because you're not so nervous around these people that you don't really know that well. You just worry about on-field performances, and off the field there was no weird nervousness or because you're around older guys who are much older than you, who have families. And also, sports can be a very selfish place where people just take care of their performances and get out the change room and don't worry about the next guy. So, but to be in that environment certainly helped me getting comfortable, and then helped me on the field as well.
And then I want us to slowly move towards your debut. You're coming into the border side at the age of 18, straight out of school.
Yeah.
And you make your professional international debut at 21, if I'm correct.
20.
Yeah. And that's the ODI Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a 2-year gap there where you're still part of the setup of your border. And going through those 2 years, what would you say was the turning point to say, okay, listen, that call is somewhere close. It's going to happen. You are going to become a professional player, or not professional, but an international player. What changed, or what performance led you to say, okay, this is now something that I want to work towards, being part of the national side?
Well, wanting to be part of the national side is always a dream from still the school days. So that the dream didn't change. But being a professional and being a school kid are two different things. So it's learning how to be a professional, obviously learning how to, first time you do gym and all the other stuff that you never did at school before. So it's learning how to be professional and how to get rid of the distractions that might come with that. Bored at the time, and I didn't get in the car, but there were things that you wanted materialistically anyway. Well, obviously you want to get paid, but we were sponsored by Mercedes-Benz. So if you played for South Africa, for example, they gave you a car. So there were so many things that you wanted outside of just playing for your country that you were striving to get, but the dream was always to play for the country. And so you work towards that by putting in the work and all that stuff. And I think when you put in the work, the talent and everything speaks for itself. So all I did in those 2 years is really just work hard on my craft and try to be the best bowler I could be. And then there comes a lot of discipline and a lot of things that, distractions, obviously. It's the first time you get a salary as a kid. It wasn't a lot of money, but it's something. You could blow that in a week, or you could, take care of the things that are really important, but as a mixture of both as a kid, because you don't really know how to take care of money. But there were challenges for sure, but the dream was always to play for the country, and I think the work and the talent took care of that.
Before we then move to the country and representing your country, I want to touch up on, as an 18-year-old, you're getting a salary.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting limali. What do you do with this money? Like, how did you ensure that it does not distract you from what you're wanting to achieve?
It wasn't a lot of money. It was, I think my first paycheck was 2.5, I'm not lying, 2.5 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So my first year with Porter. What did I do with my money? I didn't do anything productive with it, I can tell you that much. I spent it like most 18, 19-year-olds my guys spend. On weekends, you go out and you're fun with your friends, and then you buy the little things that you need, I guess. So nothing that I wasn't putting the money away and saving it or anything like that. It didn't last long, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, again, it was $2,500. Might seem like a lot of money in 2001, but it really wasn't. I can't remember exactly what I did with it. There's nothing I can buy of value that I can tell you that I did.
Oh, yeah. And then you get the call then as a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Who calls you to come play for the national side? How did that happen? these are the questions that I'm going to put to you. Where are you when you get the call? Who calls you? And what was the emotions after that call?
I know who called me. I can't remember where I was when I picked up the phone or who told me. There's a former South African spin bowler called Omar Henry. He was very much involved in cricket. So he was convener of select at the time. So he was the one that called me to tell me. But he had called me before, not to call me up to the national team, but to say, yo, we're looking at you. We think you're talented. So just keep going, basically. And just a conversation to say, we have an eye on you and we think that you got whatever it takes. So just keep going. So I knew that they were looking at me before I got the actual call up to say, come up. So it was Omar Henry, the guy who called me to officially say, yo, you're going to be part of the one-day team that was playing against Sri Lanka at the time. So, but the plan was not for me to play from the first game or whatnot. It was just to be around that environment, to get used to it. And then the reason I played the last game, if you want to go there already, is when I was eventually in the setup, was we had won the series already. So the last game was in Bloemfontein and they were like, okay, we've won the series, so it's pretty much safe for you. There's not a lot of pressure for you to perform if you don't, but we've won the series, so don't worry about that, just go and perform. And that's how I can't remember exactly where I was when I got the call up. Obviously happy. Can't remember who I called to tell that I'd been called up. But yeah, I just know that I was pretty happy. Obviously very happy to be part of that, but also very nervous. So it was a bit of both. But yeah, it was all in a positive way.
And let's go back to that first call that Omar Henry gives you to say, we're looking at you. We see something, keep it up. From that call till the time that they then call you to say you're part of the team that's going to play against Sri Lanka, was there any chat about what you need to improve on in terms of getting into the side? Or?
Nah, not that I can remember. I think it was more of keep doing what you're doing. We noticed you for a reason. So, nothing specific. I think it was more of we're aware, we're looking at you, so just be aware and keep performing, because we're going to pick you obviously on your performances and on your talent, yes, but just keep working and,
2002.
Work. Yeah, 2002, yeah.
Bloemfontein.
November, December, I can't really remember the date, but it was sometime around this time.
Yeah. So, end of the series, game is already won. And if you remember at the start, we said the king of debuts is what we're calling you. The nickname that we're going to give you on the podcast. And I don't want to spoil it for people, but I want you to take us through. You get the announcement, firstly, that you're going to be part of the team that's going to play. How do you feel when you got the call to say you're going to be part of the team, you're going to be around the team, but now we've won the series. It's your chance to get out onto the field and play. How do you feel now in the match? The dream as a child is now being realized and coming to.
I mean, I don't know. Some people remember exactly, and I don't have that kind of memory. It's 21 years ago, so I know obviously the excitement was there, and I mean I was part of the squad when they told me that I'm going to play that specific game. So I can't remember where I was. I know Makaya was there, but he didn't play that game specifically. I remember that because part of the excitement was maybe I get the chance to play with Makaya for the first time. But he didn't play. I actually took his place. Really nervous, obviously. And I think what made him worse was during the game, you expect as one of the strike fast bowlers to bowl quite early into it. I think I bowled into the 20-something over. So I waited a really long time, which is unusual at the time. I don't know why Sean Pollock made me wait for that long to bowl my first ball. But the wait was agonizing because it was that long. You just want to get over it and get into it as soon as possible. But I waited for a while, and I was used to opening the bowling at border. Sure. So when I come into this environment, I'm not first change, not second change either. And I had to wait a really long time. Unusual for me, specifically first. I'd always open the bowling from junior school all the way. Always got the newborn. So that was different. And then obviously playing for your country, cameras on, everyone's watching, family and friends. I was really nervous on the field thinking, when am I going to get my chance? And I eventually got it But yeah, it was a long wait and agonizing.
And then the wait is over. You get given the ball. You're going to bowl. I'm not going to ask you about the emotional side of it, but looking back now, you did something remarkable in that game, and I want you to talk us through it.
Well, I mean, you've really pretty much said it, right, in terms of debuts. I took a wicket with my first ball. But funny enough, Upaucha had actually dropped it because it actually was a regular catch for a keeper and came off his hands. And luckily, Andrew Hall was aware and he caught it, Andrew Hall. Whatever, I think he's left, if I can't remember properly. And then he caught it. So just like a, got it, oh no, and then yes again, all in space of a second. So like 3 different emotions. But yeah, so I got a wicket off the first ball. I think the nice thing about the wicket of the first ball, it was Watapatu, who was the guy actually who was, I think he was in 50 yard and he was really batting well at the time. So it was a big wicket. So that was what I think there was the extra bonus. What was more fun about the fact that it was him, the guy who was giving us a lot of trouble at the time. So yeah, it was my first ball ever in international cricket. I got a wicket and the rest is history, I guess. And
then when you finished the game, what were your figures?
I can't remember the figures. I only got 1 wicket, mind you. That was the first one. Yeah. I don't think I finished my overs. I didn't bowl 10 of my overs. Can't remember the figures. I think it was 8 overs, 1 for 42. I'll have to like Google it and check. But something to that effect.
And then the next year after that, you then make your test debut.
Right.
2003. Pretty similar setup of you get called into the side, test side. I think they played 2 games before that. You were touring England this time around. They played, I'm not sure where the first game was, but
so it was Birmingham 1, which was at Edgbaston, then Lords. Was it 5? It was 5 test matches. So there's a third one. It was in Nottingham. Yeah, the third one was in Nottingham, and then the fourth one was in Headingley. The one I made so I was in the 4th test. So it was a 5 test series. So I made my debut on the 4th test in Headingley in Leeds. Yeah. And
then once again, king of debuts. You're being called into the side. 3 changes were made in that side. Batting wise, you're coming in as a number 9, I think.
Yeah, number 9.
Number 9. This time around, you're in the team with Makai.
Right.
It's a seamers pitch.
Yeah, no spinner. So I came in Paul Adams' place. In fact, I got told in the morning of the game because they weren't sure if they were going to play an extra seamer or an extra spinner. And they went with the extra seamer, which is me. But usually they pick the team the night before. Yeah. And you get told, so you sleep easy, whether you know you're playing or not. Right. This time around, I got told I'm going to have to wait because they weren't sure which direction they were going to go in, which wasn't a lot of fun in terms of not knowing if you're playing or not the night before, because usually, as I said, you get told. So the wait was long. And then eventually in the morning, after looking at the pitch again, I was told I was playing. So eventually the wait was over, if you want to say that, yeah. And then we go in and we bat first. Got into a lot of trouble. I come in at number 9. And then, as you said, I scored a test 50. And I'd never scored a 50, funny enough. Even at school, I hadn't scored a 50. I could bat. And because we had a strong team at Jet, especially at that time, my metric year, I didn't do a lot of batting, but I knew I could bat. I used to come and sometimes get pushed up as a pinch hitter. But I never got a chance to score a 50, ever. Even for border, I didn't. And then to do that on my debut was quite special and quite cool. And a lot of fun.
As a fast bowler, coming into the side, because the pitch is accommodator for fast bowlers, you come in and you score 50. Do you then regard yourself as an all-rounder after that?
No, there's a lot of, if you go down history-wise, there's a lot of guys who weren't necessarily known for batting that did get 50s. I wasn't unique in that sense, and it wasn't the first time that someone had done that. I think it was unique in that it was my debut. That's probably why it separates me from maybe the other guys who batted number 9, 10. I mean, there's a guy who batted number 11 who's got 100 or 99 or something, so it wasn't unique.
But I also think what also then makes it unique is the pressure the team was under at the time.
Yeah, so again, 142 for 7 when I walked in. So we weren't in a very good position as a team. And so for me to come in partnership with Gary, I think 150 exactly on the dot was a record at the time. I'm not sure if it still is. So to contribute to the team in terms of helping them win was great. But again, disappointingly, I got injured, which is obviously the thing about my career, that injuries were a part of it since the school days, to be honest with you. So injuries in cricket were always haunting me and always part of my career. And they sort of in many ways defined my career to a way, because I retired because of injury. So I got injured. I pulled the side strain after, I think, my second or third over. So there was happiness for debut, scoring a 50, and then there was obviously, I couldn't show people what I could do in terms of what I was picked for to play. So yeah, that was disappointing. But we won the test match in the end. So that was great that I could contribute in my debut, but disappointing that I couldn't bowl and show people what I could do at the time.
And you unfortunately got that side strain injury in your debut, and I think it was about another 2-3 years before you then come back into the side again. Was it? I'm not
2 years, 2005. I came back Zimbabwe, 2005.
And once again, when you come in against Zimbabwe, you come in and you again shock people.
Well, there was a one-day game just before the test match you're talking about. There was a one-day game in Port Elizabeth, which is now Epai, that I played in. That was my first game for South Africa in 2 years, mind you, as you said. So I played in that game, bowled really well, bowled quickly. And then Zimbabwe again played against, and the test matches started in Cape Town was the first one. Then the second one was in Pretoria, Centurion. So that was the first time I played a test match since my debut, actually. So it was like, 2.5 years. And then I was man of the match against Zimbabwe, which was, I almost say that was actually my real debut in many ways because I could actually bowl and do what I was actually picked for instead of just batting and getting injured. So to do that on a game that I didn't get injured in and be able to show people what I could do was a lot of fun again. And I really enjoyed it just.
And is that the game that you got the 9?
Yeah, 9 wickets in it. Yeah, 3 and 6. So yeah, I got man of the match in that game.
And then, doing my own research, I sit down and I think test matches, you made it up to 6.
Yeah.
19 wickets.
Yeah.
In 6 test matches.
Right.
That stat on its own, even though you say like Nyani, it was very unfortunate with the injuries, but what you did in 6 matches was really showing people that there was something there. And when you now sit in retrospection and look back on your career, how do you feel about those injuries?
It's a hard. I mean, there's a guy called Mfuneko Ngam who also played for South Africa. He's second guy after Makai, actually. So he was just before me. He also had a lot of injury problems and retired. We actually have this conversation all the time when I'm with him and we're commentating about injuries and how they affected our careers. So there's a lot of, I don't call it regret, but reflecting back on it and thinking what if. So the what if thing haunts me and him. For a while, I don't know how to get rid of that what if, because we're certainly involved in the game right now. So I watch it, I see it every day. And it always hits me sometimes. And when people talk about the past and what this guy could do. So there's a pride thing, there's an ego thing that I could bowl faster than this guy and do this. And I never really got, the chance to really show off what I could do for a consistently long period of time. So there is a bit of the what if and a bit of regret, but it is what it is, and that's just his life. I'm not the first guy whose career was ended by injuries. I won't be the last either. So it's a part of life. It is what it is.
And as you've said, it's a part of life. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Looking back at it and the experience that you've come to gain out of it, what advice would you then have for younger kids that are still playing to try keep their bodies intact? And when those injuries do come,
but sometimes there's nothing you can do. I mean, sometimes people are just injury prone, I guess. But then sometimes it's because of how you look after your body, your bowling action. If you have a bowling action, there's a lot of specific things that the average person that doesn't really know the ins and outs of the game will know. So if you have a mixed action, for example, you have a higher chance of getting injuries. So I had a bit of that. My action was a little bit mixed, I wish. So the only thing I would say is, if I want to go back and say, what would I have fixed? I probably would have sorted out my bowling action that it wasn't mixed and it wasn't prone to injury. In terms of eating and diet and training, I did that. I did as well as I could do. I guess as a kid now, growing up, if you have that, then make sure that those kind of things are taken care of to give yourself the best chance for you not to get injured.
And then, the injury part, let's move on from it. But now when you look back on cricket, because cricket Yako didn't start in 2000 when you burst onto 2002, when you burst onto the international scene. As you've said, it goes back to the 90s.
Yeah.
To 90s. When you look back on the sport cricket, what impact would you say it's had on your life as a person?
Well, I mean, it's what I do now for a living. I talk it. So it's provided a platform for me to be able to do something outside of, studying, getting an education and working somewhere else. So I still have a platform to be able to talk about the game itself. I think you learn a lot of lessons, like any other job. I mean, discipline, work, being on time. I mean, if a bus says we're leaving at 9, if you're not there at 9 o'clock, the bus is gone. So I take that into a lot of things I do right now. If I'm supposed to be there at 10, I'm there before. So there's disciplines and there's how you eat, all those things. It takes a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't see, especially in the off season when no one sees what you're doing, the work you put in, and how even friends that I used to play with that are still friends. Yeah, so there's a lot of life lessons you take from it. People that you met then that I'm still friends with, that I'm thankful for. There's a lot that cricket gave me that's very good, that I'll take forward into for the rest of my career, and I can use when I'm in this environment or when I'm sitting talking to kids about discipline and what it takes to get to a certain level. So yeah, there's a lot that you can learn from that in terms of, I'm not a coach. I haven't got into coaching, but if I ever do, then the lessons I've learned from as a player, I can take those into coaching, whether it's kids or it's guys that are professionals as well.
And as a person, one of the things that I've picked up, especially about professional athletes from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s.
You're starting from the 60s?
Yeah, no. I'm going back deliberately to the 60s. Okay. Is because there's a common thread or trend that I'm seeing of adversity is something that a lot of you had to overcome to get onto the international scene, to make it as a professional player. And when I look now in this day and age and looking at a lot of the guys' journeys, is some guys are identified, as you said, you were also identified as an 11-year-old, but now it is so, I'm not going to say easier, but that journey is a lot more carved out to become a professional cricketer, professional rugby player. For rugby, for example, you go through the provincial weeks, you'll make it through to Craven Week. Craven Week, there's a million scouts who are there looking for people. You'll get scouted, whether it's in the country or out of the country. You become part of a junior setup and you make it through. Cricket, pretty similar. Kayamachola Week. From there, opportunities do come around and then you move on. But looking back, Nyani, when I say the early 2000s, 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, a lot of these structures weren't there at that time. And there's a lot of adversity that has come through. A lot of people have to overcome to get to become professional players. And do you think, in your story, for example, you had witnessed not necessarily witnessed it, but having the house burnt down because of the conflict that was happening in the...
Well, no, the house wasn't burnt down. It was they just attacked the house physically, and attacked the humans in the house. The house didn't burn down, yeah.
But having gone through such experiences and many other experiences of the injuries, do you think that has had an influence on your character as a player, more towards the end of your career, and then now as a person?
Oh, I don't have an answer to that question. I think when it comes to adversity, though, it comes in different forms for different people. I've told you my story, but in many ways, the distractions back then weren't as much as they are now for kids growing up. I know you talk about opportunities. I mean, we had the weeks as well. We had OK Week. We had Perm Laser Week at the time in the 13. So we had those things back then in the 90s, that is. I don't know about the 60s and 70s. Sure. Don't quote me on that.
Sure.
That's a different era. That's before apartheid really got abolished. So those challenges were way different and way more challenging. And the opportunities weren't there for those guys to play because we weren't allowed to play. So by the time I became a professional, we were allowed to play for your country. So the dynamics were very different. But I think the distractions back then weren't as many. There were no phones. There was no social media. The drugs and all that stuff weren't as bad as what they are now for kids growing up. So depending where you grow up and the environment you grow up in. I had it pretty easy in terms of that distractions. I was at a school that sports was number one on the thing. So I almost find it was actually easier for me to get into professional sports then. And it was still new for a lot of people. So the quota system, for example, was a new thing.
Yeah.
And it was embraced at the time, there's a bit of a pushback now. I mean, I just saw something about the DA trying to take CSA to court. So then it was embraced because people were given opportunities and people understood we're coming out of a dark period and they wanted to give guys opportunities to show what they can do. So there was a push for black players to there is now still, but there isn't a pushback as much as there is now. And also the distractions aren't the same. So yeah, you can take every era and you can find positives and you can find negatives. And today, again, social media, drugs, no sports in schools, for example. So yeah, there are challenges for kids today. It's not as easy as many people think it is, especially coming from an environment like Ilali or Ekasi, for example, where the distractions are a lot more than we had growing up. So yeah, there's good and bad from both areas.
And let's move back to the cricket. You did mention that you retired because of injuries. And I think at the time you were with the Cobras when you did retire.
Yeah.
That transition, was it merely the injury that I can't take it anymore, or was it a medical decision to say, okay, no?
Well, it was a medical decision, which I didn't fight. In hindsight, I probably should have, because I know there was, I think Mone Moko had a similar injury, maybe not as bad as mine, but he had a similar injury, and I read something. I never spoke to him about this, but I read something that he got told that his career was pretty much over, and he pretty much said, I'm going to get a second opinion and I'm going to fight it. And I went the other way around. I was told by the physio and the doctor, and I sort of just took it and ran. But I think that was a build-up of, as your question was, because of the injuries I've been getting over and over and over again, a lot of frustration, a lot of, I think I'm done with this. And I think mentally I just wanted to be done with it in many ways. So in fact, it was almost good news to me, to in a weird way, that I'm over this part of my career that was so frustrating. That I actually just wanted to give up, and I think that injury came at a time where I thought, I need this, because I was just over all the injuries and the build-up. So that news almost was a good thing, but in hindsight, I was very short-sighted at the time, and I should have probably taken a second opinion, but that's how it worked out, and that's how it was. But again, after retirement, there wasn't a plan. It was a very difficult period in my life. Those 2-3 years, we're trying to figure out what's next, and never thought I'd ever get into media and do commentating as a person, or coaching, that is. I always wanted to try something outside of the game. But so there was a very difficult period for a couple of years where I was trying to figure things out. And it's common in sportsmen. Even the guys that have a plan to retire, they still, unless there's something you want to do that you know specifically what you want to do afterwards, it's a very difficult period for sportsmen to figure out.
How did you navigate that 2-3 year period afterwards?
Again, like I said, difficult period, trying to figure out. So it was a lot of ups and downs. I don't know. I just got through it somehow. I just did. Friends, family. I mean, I'm not exactly an open book, so it's hard for me to express those things to people. But yeah, it was a difficult period, but I got through it somehow. And part of it is because there was a job that, well, not a full-time job, but working for SuperSport was pretty cool, so that I could go back into the cricket. And then I was also a selector for the under-19s. So I got to start getting busy, and so those things started going away slowly but surely. But those 2-3 years were difficult to sort of navigate through.
And looking back now at that transition period where you probably get the news that this is the end of the playing career, you then end the career, and that 2-3 year period of difficulty, what lessons would you have learned from that transition period that you would love to impart onto the next group of players?
Well, like I said, not everybody's got the opportunity to maybe perhaps go to school and study while you're still playing. I certainly think that would have been one, because I think we all need some sort of a safety net. If things don't go, plan A doesn't work, you need a plan B. Sometimes as cricketers, as sportsmen in general, we've all got a plan A, but there's no plan B. We think it's going to work out, and we are so focused on this one thing to make it work that if it doesn't work, And then there's a plan B, and there's moving back to your parents, there's moving back to a car. And then you get distracted and you get into the wrong stuff. So I would certainly say if you have an opportunity to study and get an education, have a plan B, not just a plan A, and have something to do, whether it's business and also like getting to the right business and to the right people that are around you. Because I've lost money because I was so desperate to get a plan B, which was an education, that I put my money into the wrong things, thinking that after cricket I'll take care of this business or this will bring me some sort of income. So yeah, having the right people around you to advise you what you do with your money, studying, having a plan B, certainly are two things that I will certainly embark and tell kids about while they're still studying. And I told you earlier about my education at school. Because I knew I was going to play cricket, that was plan A. I was like, I don't need to get A's at school and go to varsity. So I certainly would go back and change all of that, because I know that when things don't work out the way you want them to work out. And the thing is, a very small percentages of cricket players, after they retire, don't need to work. Very small. The guys who play IPL, the guys who play international cricket for a very long time. Most people are going to have to work at some point. So education.
We then move on to your legacy. I'm going to call it that. And, after the transition period, you said you made it, there's the super sport commentating that you do. And then you were a selector for the under-19 side. And now looking forward, like what type of a legacy would you want to leave behind? What are some of the projects that you would want to get involved in going forward?
Wow, that's a good question. So a friend of mine, I think Tando Kobe, I went to school with. He suggested I open a foundation, so we're working on that for one. Something that we actively trying to figure out how we can try to give back. So we started a foundation, but we haven't started actively doing anything with it just yet. But there are plans going forward to do something with it. That's just basically giving back. And doing part of the question that you asked me earlier, what advice would I give to kids coming up? And it's part of it is doing those sort of things, getting into areas where we can educate, make plan A, plan B, plan C for kids that are coming into the professional league or want to be professional athletes, and having the right people or right structures around them to give yourself the best chance to succeed in your sport. So we are opening up a foundation. That's part of what I want to, going forward, as part of my legacy, something that I want to try and do is certainly give back, and whatever knowledge that I have picked up throughout the years of play, and even as a commentator, what you see on the field. So yeah, we're doing that. And that's the plan going forward. Next year, we want to kick it into drive. Just slowed down a little bit by the pandemic. So that sort of took a backseat for a while. So now we've started those conversations again. So that's part of what I want to do, certainly. When it comes to directly in terms of cricket, I'm not sure if I have the thing about coaching just yet. As a full-time coach, I'm looking into maybe doing consulting here and there. But as a full-time coach, I'm not sure if I have that in me just yet. So that will take time, and it will figure itself out in many ways. But yeah, the foundation's one. That's pretty much the plan right now. And then, as I said, coaching not so much, and then keep doing what I'm doing commentating-wise.
Yeah. I'm not going to ask too much detail about the foundation because I don't want to take away the shine from the actual launch when you do launch it.
Right.
But I do want to just pick on the idea of it. And you do say that you're going to be helping kids set up that plan A, plan B, plan C for afterlife and within the sport, and help kids prepare for professional careers. But are you limiting it to only cricket? How's it going to work?
No. Sports in general. And also, the other thing that's obviously big where we come from, structures, nets, just facilities are a problem. We had to, for example, the really talented kids in the 90s had to go to Eddale, for example, to get those sort of the coaching, the facilities, to get to play sports every day. We don't have that where we come from. So there's part of the plan, as in the foundation, to build those sort of things, whether it's a rugby field or cricket nets here, so kids can actually get an opportunity to play. We didn't get that, and we still don't have that. Again, if I think of any prominent black athlete who's made it, a lot of them had to go to see at Grey High School or Mackay Outdale or Meaddale. If you think back, all those guys, a lot of them don't come from the schools nobody knows about. They all come from these schools, but they were taken out of the environment and taken to those schools. So if we could find a way to build structures and facilities in those places, and it's hard because you have to upkeep them too, and keep them going and make sure, like a cricket pitch, Kwalanga, they are Tata in winter because people want that. So there's a lot of challenges that do come with it, but there is a plan to try to get those things built and make sure the kids do learn the game in the environment that they're comfortable in, instead of taking someone out of a school and, to an environment they're not used to. And they might be really good at sports, but they might fail educationally because they're not taught in the language that they're comfortable in.
Yeah, and that is actually a big thing of making that transition.
Yeah.
I mean, coming from a school where the teacher, if you don't get it the first time around, can break it down in his class.
Yeah.
And then getting into a space where it's predominantly English.
Exactly, yeah. So there are challenges for sure, but, if you could build those facilities and try bring back sports to those schools and those places, it's a challenge, a huge challenge, and you need government involved, but it's part of what we are trying to do.
Yeah. And I must commend you because that is a position that not a lot of people want to put themselves in. When I say people, organizations, institutions, I did reading on our sports policy as a country, and school sports is such a big chunk of it. But when you look at the investment that goes into it, it's only centered around the Model C or former Model C schools, and not a lot of attention is being put into the disadvantaged schools or previously disadvantaged areas. And looking at the impact of e-sport, like e-sport is not just a thing where it's helping you physically.
Yeah.
Yes, it's keeping up your physical health, but as you said, you made a lot of friends through sports. So from a social perspective, it helps you build relationships with people. And even for me, I never played sports professionally, but some of the friends that I have till this day are not all from the same school. It's from the other schools that we played on a Saturday, going away to a Grey and sleeping over and making a friend that you would have never made if you didn't play sports. So it really does have an impact that goes far beyond the actual sports field and goes way deeper into a person's life. Then as we move along and we talk about your legacy, you mentioned consulting. Is it coaching, consulting?
Coaching, yeah. More coaching, more than anything else, yeah.
And is there a specific area of consulting that you want to look into?
No, not really. But I mean, obviously schools is probably the easiest one to get into at the moment. So I've looked into that a little bit, but not too seriously at the moment. I think a lot of the thought process and everything we're talking about now in terms of going forward and the legacies, there's things that are planning to kick into gear next year. Yeah, it's like really going to see where we can, do those things that we're looking to do. But yeah, that's part of what I want to do, consulting. And maybe that will give me that thing that I need to say, maybe I can actually get into coaching and be a coach one day. So yeah, that's part of it, sure.
I'm actually going to throw you into the deep end with this question. 2024, one of the schools hits you up and look, listen, we want you to come in and put together our cricket program. We want you to run our cricket program as a school, be our pro, because I do believe a lot of schools now have cricket pros part of their systems. What are some of the immediate things that you would look into implement into? And I don't want to throw you into a deep end of just putting the question to UNJ, but a school that has the financial resources to back some of the ideas that you have and that are willing to listen to what you want to put together. What are some of the ideas?
Yeah, I haven't really, because I've thought about this thing, because I know there was an opening at Bishop's a year or two ago, something like that, and I thought about it, but I didn't really apply because I'm not sure how it's run and if people allow me to do what I want to do, because obviously you're under a school, so a lot of the control is probably out of your hands. So I would need to have a conversation with someone who's been there, who's done that. and then get an idea of what I can do and what I cannot do in terms of the changes you want to make. Like Bishops, for example, is a huge school with a lot of resources, facilities, everything you need as a coach, as a director of coaching, a guy to implement plans to succeed. But again, I know Bishops is very much, they're very good at that. They've got that Vuza rugby program academy, so they're willing to go out and outreach and go reach the areas that most schools probably don't and help out in that direction. But I think, again, there are no facilities, Kwalanga, for example, for kids to come in. So I would love to do something to that effect, of getting kids cricket-wise and involve them, because I know rugby, it's worked out really well so far for them. Yeah. So something to that effect. People won't know what the Vuza Academy rugby thing is at Bishops, but you'd understand what that is. So they have a team and they play against other teams within the region, but it's underprivileged black kids in general that they coach and that they look after. So that is something that I think is a really good idea in terms of getting kids that one can't afford to go to Bishops, and maybe bursaries aren't for you can't give everybody a bursary, but if you want kids to actually thrive and to get those opportunities, that's certainly something you can look into.
Yeah. So for the people that aren't really aware of Ivusa is a club that I'm going to call it. It's
something to that effect.
Yeah, where Bishop supports an institution, Kwalanga, that brings about young kids and gives them the opportunity to play rugby without taking them away from the environment of Kwalanga, but play rugby as a sport. Look after them nutrition-wise in terms of their homework as well, and then give them that opportunity on a weekly basis to compete against some of the schools that Bishops does play against, your Weinbergs, your Sachs.
Yeah, the top schools, So you play against the best instead of just playing, the other kids from Guguletu, for example. So it's a nice opportunity for those kids to show what they got. And then from there, you can make a career out of it because you get picked up for Western Province through that, and then your life changes. So cricket-wise, that would be nice if we had the same structures or same sort of setup, and that'd be something you could look into as a director of cricket.
And then that's an actually good project, especially the way that you're thinking of it. Nyani, the Vusa program has been successful. I'm not too sure if my memory serves me right. Kumbuzo Noche, current Sharks player, is also a product of.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not sure when it started and who started it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
Yeah. So it does widen the pool of selection. I mean, we've got a quota system now, and people are saying black players are being pushed into teams without earning the talent-wise, the opportunity to be there. But I mean, if you have programs such as Ivusa across all sporting codes, you're essentially widening the pool and you're ensuring that on a weekly basis, the black players that are coming from your disadvantaged positions have that opportunity of competing against some of the schools. Because it's quite fascinating to watch Ivusa under 9s run circles around the sex team that has all the resources against the Bishops team that has all the resources. And it does put that, not doubt, but it does plant a seed in everyone's head to say, hang on, what role can I play? Just as Umdu who's coming in and watching, I've got no relation to anyone, Vusa or Bishops, but me just as a supporter to say, hang on, there are kids here who have come together and are doing really well. What role can I play as Umdu, whether it's coming out and supporting these kids every day, or just me putting 20 Rand a month towards the program. I want us to then move on towards you and your advice, because you've learned a lot of lessons in the sport of cricket. And Nalapembilwen, you've moved along, 20 years since you made your debut. What life advice from the life that you've gone through, from as a kid to where you are now, what life advice would you have for people listening to this?
Life advice, I think I've sort of touched a little bit on that earlier about what I would tell kids, right? In many ways, pretty much the same things. I think sports is something that I really enjoyed. I played it because it was a passion of mine. I wasn't pushed. I know how you get parents overbearing or want their kids to do A, B, C, and D. So that takes out the enjoyment part, I think, for them. But for me, I loved it. So it was easy for me to wake up in the morning and go training. And as much as it's, especially here in Cape Town when it's cold in the winter and you don't want to get out of bed because you have to go to training. But because of my enjoyment factor and because I wanted to succeed so badly, it was easy to get up and go. And there's days that you don't want to get up and go. Like the everyday person who has to go to work every day, that has to earn a salary or money, and those people probably don't even enjoy what they do. It's pretty much a lot the other way around for a lot of guys that play sports. So the enjoyment factor is always going to be there. I think the thing that I would say is probably don't take it for granted. Yeah. And that goes beyond just sport. I think just don't take things that you enjoy or the things that, especially cricket, because like sports is a very short part of your life in terms of the actual, when you're playing time, and you learn a lot of lessons. You make a lot of friends. You make some friends, some people. So yeah, I think just enjoy it, but don't take it for granted because it could end just like that. One injury, for example. Yeah. So don't take it for granted. Put in the work right now, and you'll see the results later on. So I think that's probably my only advice outside of everything else that I've said. Don't take it for granted, and there's a saying that people like to say: make the main thing the main thing. For the 10 years, 15 years that you play, make the main thing the main thing, because you end up regretting it if you don't put everything into it, and you prioritize other things besides the main thing. Yeah.
And I think you've actually spoken to the next question I was going to ask you of what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I think along the way, you pick up so many things from people. Some not said, some just watching. Yeah. I mean, I've watched, like, as I said, I've watched Makaya since we were kids, and the work ethic in terms of training is... I haven't seen anything like it in terms of how hard he worked to get to where he was. I think people talk about it all the time, but when you see it firsthand, you see the man put in a lot of work, and other guys with the same amount of talent or even less talent don't even put in as much work as he put in. So life advice, in many ways, you see it and you pick up, and some things are said that you hear, that you take in. But in general, the hard work that comes into it, the discipline that comes with it to try and make it in this sport. The hardest thing about sport, and maybe the best advice I'd ever got, was Pete Proteas said something to me when I just started playing for South Africa. He said the easiest thing is to actually play for their country. Not the easiest, but it's easy to walk into it when you have a lot of talent. But maintaining and staying there is the hardest thing, because there's many guys who want to take your position, and there's so many distractions that come with that. So to have that discipline to stay consistent and to make it a career takes a lot of work, and it's hard.
And I think we're going to move on to the tradition of the show, where the previous guests get to ask a question to the next guest of the show without really knowing who the next guest will be. And so this question that I have for you is from Mr. Mandla Kakai, UWC, University of the Western Cape's Director of Sport. And his question for you is, why do you do what you do? So let's put it back to the cricket now, of why did you take up cricket?
Oh, that's pretty easy. Just
as a professional career.
Yeah, because I just loved it and I was really good at it. It's easy to do something when you're really good at something, because then it's a money grab for you. Yeah. Because if you're just good, but you might not enjoy it. I mean, there's many people who work 9 to 5, but it's a money grab and they're talented at it, but they don't really enjoy it. A lot of people don't really get to pursue their dreams because of many circumstances. So I got that opportunity, and it was something that I dreamed about as a kid, and I loved it. So it was pretty easy for me.
And if we now were to put that question in what you do now, why do you do what you do?
I mean, again, it's part of what I've always known and what I've always done. Commentating, especially now in this class, is actually a lot of fun. It was a little bit different in English, because when I first started it was just because I needed to do something to get out of this house without knowing what I was doing for the next couple of years. So I was trying to figure things out at that time when I started. But then again, it was purely based on get out of the house, make a little bit of money. But with this class and now, it's a lot of fun. It doesn't feel like work anymore. Never really felt like work in the beginning, even the English commentating part, but now it's really a lot of fun. So I really enjoy it. Again, yeah, that's why I do it.
And to close it off, I'm going to pose the very first question we had from the first guest, which was Ubongi Mbayeka, and her question for Mandla was, if you were not involved in sport at all, what do you think you would have been doing? So let's take it back to high school. If cricket wasn't a thing and you were to finish off high school, what career path would you have probably?
Are we talking about cricket specifically? Because I would the easy answer is rugby.
Let's close sport off.
Okay.
Yeah. What professional career?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm just trying to think back then, because I can't remember. I mean, because like as I said, my memory is cricket, easy way out. Education, as long as I pass, right? I think after school, I can't talk about exactly what I wanted to do while I was at school, but I know for a long time, even maybe it's part of the environment I grew up in. We loved to argue as kids at college house at school. I was always intrigued by law for some reason. So maybe I watched too much TV and series. It looks like it's fun when you watch it on TV, but yeah, I think law would have been the path. And
so law because of the love of arguing.
That and just trying to figure things out, I guess. Yeah, okay. Just trying to figure things out. Trying to show how, I don't know, outsmart people. That's what it is, but in general. So something like that.
Thank you very much for taking the time, firstly, to join us. And secondly, also just opening up and sharing about your story, some of the challenges you faced and how you've overcome those challenges. When we started this podcast, the idea was not everybody has the opportunity of having someone, a role model there. But, growing up, myself, as I said, I used to see the pictures of Put Makaya, see the pictures of Oputera Mtembu, all the people that have gone through the school, even yourself, like on the walls of the school. And, a lot of kids that go to the school have that dream of becoming a professional player, especially now when you're coming into a school that has produced the professional players. But now having the opportunity to speak to you earlier on, I think it was last year when I first started speaking to you, but, just learning quite a lot from you. One thing I'll say is you're one of the people that you will be the last person to speak in a room. And one thing I've learned is with that, you're not just being quiet, but you're literally observing abantu and what's being said before you give your opinion on something. I'm not sure if you do it deliberately.
No, I've never noticed that. I don't know that.
That's literally and even with some of the meetings that we were part of together earlier on this year, that is something that was consistent about you. And you'll be the last person to speak. And when you give your advice or you speak, you then put that question mark about it, like, I never actually thought of it this way. So I really do appreciate you coming onto the podcast and sharing your story. We wish you all of the best going forward. With the closer commentary, I think that's been a change, a much needed change that has attracted a whole lot more people back into watching your sport, not just cricket, but even in rugby. It makes it a whole lot more exciting. I know Bandubati Sianglola, but that's the nature of Umnyama. Vernac is that good.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys giving me the platform. But yeah, it's been fun. And again, thanks for having me. And good luck with your podcast too as well, going forward.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hey guys, thank you very much for watching yet another episode of the African Playbook Network. We really appreciate you taking your time to watch this episode. Please do share in the comments what you enjoyed about the episode, where you're listening to the episode from, and let us know anything that you want to share with us. Please make use of the comment section. If you really enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit the like button. Let us know that you enjoyed the episode. And don't forget as well, if you haven't hit that subscription button or you haven't followed us, please do hit that button. We'd love to hear more from you guys. And don't forget, click on the link below and you'll find all of our social media pages. Hit follow, like, subscribe, do your thing.